Good morning, afternoon, or evening, folks, and welcome to Cast of All Trades. I'm your host, Orion Siebert, and in this episode, I take you behind the scenes with the podcast. I share what my past experiences with podcasting was like, and what my process for improving Cast of All Trades will be in the future. So, without further ado, let's get into it. First, I want to talk a bit about what my past experience with podcasting and media has been like in general. So, what have I done in the past, and what are some of the skills and experiences I've taken from that I can try to apply to my current goal of growing and improving Cast of All Trades. So, I want to start with the podcasts that I've done in the past, how those have started, and what they've become now. Starting with my first podcast that I did back in, I want to say it was April of 2020 when I started this. The show is called Basements and Lizards, D&D Tips and Tricks, and it was a duo show where I was one of the hosts and my friend Gabe, who I interviewed on episode 2 of Cast of All Trades, was the other host. We're both big D&D fans, and we both enjoyed D&D podcasting a lot at the time. We enjoyed listening to a lot of different D&D shows, and we are both very knowledgeable about D&D from a mechanics perspective. So we figured, hey, we're both pretty good at this. We've done this for a while. Why don't we start a show? I was the one who approached him and said, hey, do you want to join me for a D&D show? And that's just sort of how it went. I did basically all the back-end stuff, which in retrospect I probably could have and probably should have given him more free rein to handle some of the back-end stuff. I did basically all the scheduling as well, so once again, probably should have left him to do some of that as well, so oh well. But we ended up doing, I want to say, 14 or 15 episodes of that podcast before we ended up wrapping it up and calling it quits. So how did it turn out? What did I ultimately learn from it? So from it, I learned how to use basic podcasting tools. I learned how to use something like Audacity to not just record my end, but take his audio as well and edit those together to be like a good, fairly well matched up like audio files. We both ended up recording our audio on our own computers. He would send it over to me and I would edit them together. So that's how I learned my basic audio editing skills. It was also during that time that I had a lot of mistakes, or perhaps not mistakes, but I put a lot more effort into the audio editing that I maybe should have at the time. For example, I would go through and I would cut out almost every single filler word, and that took up a lot of time. That's something that I aspire to not do now, because one, I see it as a waste of time, and two, if it's something that I would continue doing, then it wouldn't encourage me to get better and improve my own public speaking skills. So that's something that I learned from Basements and Lizards. From it, I also learned how to do some very basic and very rudimentary graphic design skills for creating our logo. And we did some very minimal, very basic social media marketing, where I would post new episodes on Facebook. We made a little Facebook page, and that was kind of it. We would post each week of, this is our new episode, this is what we're talking about, and yeah. As for preparation for each show, ultimately we didn't do very much preparation, and it would be very off the cuff, where we would know what the topic was for each week, because those first 15 episodes were entirely surrounding the player's handbook of D&D, specifically digging into the various character classes of the game. So each episode we would spend, I want to say it was anywhere from an hour and a half to 2, I think our longest episode was 2.5 hours, but I honestly don't remember now. But essentially taking an hour and a half to 2 hours to break down each class feature by feature, and then go into each of their subclasses feature by feature, where we would sit down, we would bounce some ideas off of each other and see really, what does this D&D class look like? What are some different builds you could do with it? What are some interesting roleplay mechanics you could take with it? That was sort of our goal, is we wanted to be a good introduction. We want these first 15 episodes to be a good introduction for new players coming to the game, to decide, is this something I want to try? Here are a couple podcast episodes they could listen to learn everything they really need to about how to play a specific kind of character. So that's ultimately what we did. Did that for about 15 episodes with, I know we had one episode in there where we sat down and built characters together. So yeah, that's some of the main stuff that I learned and that I took away from Basements and Lizards. It was a fun podcast to do at the time, but honestly, I'm kind of glad it's done, and I learned a lot from it. Moving on to my next podcast, one that I've done almost in secret for the past year, a show called The Book of Orion, where I started this podcast sort of, I wouldn't say on a whim necessarily, but basically it was an on a whim sort of thing that I decided I'm going to do this now, where essentially for many of my high school years, in particular my later high school years, I had a nightly journal that I would write. Did that for a while. I wrote in it every single night. And yeah, but over time, I fell off of that again. And when you fall off of a hobby or fall off of a habit, it can sometimes be very difficult to get back onto it. I started beating myself up over it a bit. As the years went by, I found different ways to do my journaling, where before I'd started the Book of Orion, I had a sort of weekly journal, kind of, where I would have a weekly to-do list where I could copy-paste this whole weekly schedule and then make edits to it whenever I wanted. So that was kind of a journal, but not really. So finally I decided, all right, enough's enough. I'm going to try something totally different that I haven't done before. Instead of writing down every day, like bits and pieces, I'm going to keep my weekly schedule, my weekly to-do list that I can edit on the fly whatever I want. But at the end of each week, I'm going to record an episode of a Book of Orion journal podcast. That's what it was going to be. It was going to be a podcast entirely for me, not something that I would really advertise or put out there. And that's basically what it became. It became a show for me to essentially round up the events of the past week and express it and share it with the world in my own voice. Mostly share it with myself or share it with close family members who want to know what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about, and why not, and whatnot, because I do not do social media. I hate it with a burning passion, and this is a good way for me to practice a few things and to see if I could, without any sort of incentive, just on my own, post a podcast every single week for an entire year. And I proved to myself that I can do that, because during the entirety of 2023, I never missed a week of the Book of Orion. I recorded it almost every Saturday, if not the Sunday after, and posted it basically every Tuesday, except for on the rare occasion that I would accidentally click the scheduling thing wrong. But overall, in essence, I never missed a week. Every week, there is always something put out there. So what did I learn from that? I learned that, one, the limiting factor of every single podcast, the host, I could overcome that. I know that I can make an episode every single week without any sort of incentive, because I'm not getting any money from it. I'm not getting any external validation for the Book of Orion. I know that I can do it from internal motivation alone for an entire year at least. So that is sort of what gave me the confidence to move on to doing the Cast of All Trades. Well, Cast of All Trades, not the Cast of All Trades. That gave me some confidence to move on to doing this new show. What else did I learn from it? I learned how to do some more basic audio editing stuff. I learned about some different AI tools that have been able to help me out a bit here and there with various graphic design elements I might have needed, and some other audio elements that I may have needed. For example, for every Book of Orion episode that is less than half an hour in length, a majority of them are first edited by me in Audacity, and then for every episode that's less than half an hour in length, I will actually put that through Adobe's podcast AI editor to help clean it up just a bit more. And I learned that, hey, that's pretty cool. I can do that. And that started to open my eyes a bit more to using AI in my various doings, in my various projects. So that's one thing that I took away from it. I learned how to make some pretty good templates that I can rely on for my podcasting. Sure, the Book of Orion is a very scripted, not necessarily scripted, but it's a very repeatable show. where each week is just talking about the events of the prior week. That's it. So it's easy for me to make a template that I can refer to and quickly fill out on the day of the recording. So yeah, I learned how I can make templates that I'll actually use, and I learned how to change them over time to adapt them to my current needs or my new desires of what I want the show to be like. So overall, I'd say that's some of the main skills that I've learned from doing the Book of Orion. Those are the two main media/podcasting outlets that I've been able to actually do or work on. So the rest of these are just experiences I've had throughout my life that have had some sort of skills that I believe will be relevant to me improving Castfall trades in the future. So I have 4 more things that I want to touch on for past experience with presenting. First of all, being one that I'm pretty sure all of us have had at some point, and that is presentations for school. Of all of my presentations, certainly senior year of high school is when I really started taking presentations more seriously, or at least I started to have more fun with them, is what I want to say about it. Of all the stories that I have from high school, my presentations from senior year are probably some of my favorites, just because I was able to get away with a lot of weird crap during that class. Although it certainly helped that it was it was senior year, second semester, like the very last period of the day. You know that people are checked out, so yeah, expectations were low, and I was able to have a lot of fun doing basically whatever I wanted with those presentations. I could get very creative and experiment, see what worked well, what didn't, and I was able to take that experimenting and continue to do that a bit more as I moved into university. So what have I learned from my school presentations? One, I learned that I am very good at doing the work of many people. If there is one lesson that I learned from group projects at school, it's that I have the capabilities to do the work, to do the same amount of work as 4 to 5 people and produce work that is of higher quality in a shorter amount of time. That's what I've experienced all throughout my high school and most of my college career, where I've been able to outperform basically everyone at almost everything that I really put my heart into. So yeah, perhaps not the lesson that they were intending me to take away from it, but certainly is the lesson that I did take away from it. I did learn how to work with other people, of course, because you're not always going to be able to work alone, but it is nice knowing that I do have the ability to outwork a lot of other people. I also learned how I can slowly start to get better feedback from people, because in almost all my presentations, I've scored very highly on each of them. So I didn't get too much feedback from that aside from, you did a good job, move on to the next thing. So I started going back and actively asking for more feedback from teachers and students alike to say, hey, I know I did a good job on this, but what can I do better for next time? Because it's having that growth mentality of knowing that this wasn't perfect, I know I could do better, what can I change, what can I try that could really boost this from just being a good presentation to that was next level. That's something totally new, something amazing. So I learned that if you really want to get good feedback from someone, it's good to just go and ask them directly and not have them. Okay, pausing for a second to collect my thoughts. So it's good to go talk to someone face to face to say, awesome, thank you for the feedback that you already gave me, but what else can you tell me? What could I do better that I just didn't do already? What are some small things that I could improve, or what are some changes that you might have made that I might want to look at? And from what I've seen, that's helped me go from just having good presentations to really good presentations or great presentations. So yeah, I've been able to learn from those experiences in presenting that one of my favorite things to do is to experiment with just totally random, like out of the park sort of things, such as a good example is from one of my university presentations. It was for a public speaking class, and it was our last presentation of the semester, and sort of on a whim, I had brought a pair of lighters to class, and one of these lighters was slightly modified, so it shot out a bunch of extra fuel compared to normal. So I thought to myself, I could use this for the presentation. It wasn't planned at all of how I could use it, but I thought I could use this. So almost on the fly, during my section of our group presentation, I used it for an object lesson. Mid-presentation, it drew back in the audience's attention right as they're checking out from, oh, these are more people just talking to me. When I said, well, it was right at that moment when I stepped up and said, can I get a volunteer from the audience to help me with the demonstration? So I was able to bring them in and use a pair of lighters as a fun demonstration thing that zoned them back in, and we were able to finish up the presentation great with everyone zoned in and excited, and it worked well. So ultimately, what I learned from that is that I should be able to, one, seek out feedback actively from people beyond just, yeah, you did a good job, and two, is that I should be willing to experiment and try new things. Some things are going to flop, certainly. I've had my fair share of flops in presentations, but you never know what's going to hit just right. So, yeah. Okay, the rest of these aren't going to be nearly as long as that, but three more things that I've considered to have some relevant experience, some relevant skills that I'll be trying to apply to Cast of All Trades in the future is a acting class that I took in university. I don't have too much to say on this aside from just I know that acting is a useful skill and a useful ability to have in all facets of life. Being able to put up a good face for people is helpful. And while I might not be able to pinpoint exactly what I took away from that acting class, I think it may have just helped me recognize a bit more that, oh, there are skills here that I need to work on. There's a lot of charisma and acting related skills that I personally need to work on that I think will help improve the quality of the show. Last two are one, singing in high school and doing more high school performances where it's getting used to having some sort of stage presence. Well, podcasting may be a solo act for the most part, or a solo or duo act for the most part. Being able to know that this is being recorded, this is being done for presentation's sake, and turning it into both education and entertainment, that can be helpful. So I don't have too much that I'm taking away from singing and performing in high school, aside from remembering that podcasting is both about education and entertainment. People don't like just being educated on things. They also like being entertained. So if you can entertain them while you teach them, they're going to love it so much more. It's so much easier to keep someone's attention when you can make them have fun while they're learning stuff. Last but certainly not least is my experience in teaching in both school and church-related activities. So for years at church, I would be preparing lessons and teaching them to my small group of guys. I would also be helping tutor and teach in school. So there we go. Podcasting, like I said, it's about education and entertainment. So being able to incorporate both of those elements is something important for both teaching and podcasting. So hopefully I can take some of those concepts that I learned from teaching in school and church and try to apply them to Cast of All Trades to help me grow as a podcaster and an educator. So that's a pretty good summary of my past experiences related to podcasting and media and presenting experience. So going forward, what do I want to do with Cast of All Trades? What are sort of the goals that I have going on here? So before diving into that, I want to quickly break down how I'm going to go over this. So one, I want to go over the goals. I have a couple different phases. So there's the goal phase, there's a research phase, there's a planning phase, there's a execution phase, and a measuring phase. And there's tools in there somewhere. But essentially, I'm going to have you follow through with me as I go through my plan for how am I going to figure out what I need to do, and basically everything from this is my goals to this is what I'm going to do to the actual execution side of things. So, first and foremost, what are the goals that I have for Cast of All Trades? I have it generally broken up into three major goals that have a bunch of sub goals within them. So first, I want to dramatically improve the quality of Cast of All Trades. That means improving the audio quality of it, improving the visuals, improving my personal solo speaking ability and presentation abilities, improving my interviewing abilities or my ability to work with guests. That also means being able to get guests on the show, both people I currently know and people I don't know. So I feel like those are the main things that are going to improve the quality of Cast of All Trades. Second goal is I want to grow the podcast with minimal advertising and marketing efforts on my part. I personally hate feeling like I'm selling something. I hate the idea of marketing. It's probably, well, to me, it's an idea that's almost poisoned in my head. But that said, I recognize that if I want to grow the podcast, it's a necessary evil. So, what can I do with that? What can I do to try to grow the podcast with minimal marketing and advertising efforts on my part, i.e., what has the most leverage for me? So that would mean improving video distribution, getting on more podcast distribution platforms, improving video thumbnails so that it's more appealing for people to click on them, improving episode titles and episode descriptions, i.e. SEO optimization, once again, that makes more people want to click on them to say, that seems interesting, I want to see what that one's about. I have to find ways to get other people to share my content, and I have a couple ideas on that might be able to work and might be able to help out. And finally, to help support a lot of this, is I want to be able to develop an AI-powered system for managing much of the stuff that I really don't want to do, such as social media. I said it once, I'll say it again, I hate social media with a burning passion. A lot of people get sucked into it, and it's very damaging for a lot of people, but it's also a very useful tool for businesses and professionals. So if I can find a way to weave around the personal aspect of it for me and just use AI to essentially feed it transcripts and feed it the right prompts to get it to do what I want, that would be absolutely amazing. So that's goal number 2. And goal number 3 is I want to make production easier on my end. The less I can remove, or the more I can lower that activation energy barrier that's stopping me from sitting down and recording and making the episode, the better. So what does that look like? That means I have to improve my passive note-taking strategies, i.e. remembering things that I hear as I'm not explicitly preparing for an episode. It might be something I learned in school, or it might be something that I learned listening to another podcast or reading a paper. Essentially, I want to be able to better collect these ideas or be more aware of these ideas around me and remember them as I'm preparing for upcoming episodes. I have to decrease my reliance on explicit notes. I know on some of the previous episodes, I was almost entirely reading straight from my notes for the podcast, which isn't great. It's not ideal because that means I have to take more time to write out each episode. Then I feel like I have to re-record sections over and over again because, I didn't read that part properly from my notes. And yeah, it's not ideal. I have to decrease, in a similar line to that, is I have to decrease my reliance on the pause button and audio editing. So being more willing to let some of my flaws show through of me fumbling over my words or other bits and pieces that you might not hear in the show already. So yeah. Another aspect of it is I want to focus on creating more original content because much of what I have done was either inspired by or heavily supported by other podcasts and YouTube channels. A good example of this would be last episode that I did on breathing, the fundamental skills for life, where a lot of that episode was inspired by, or if not directly ripped from, an Andrew Huberman podcast episode on breathing. Sure, I was able to supplement it with a bunch of other episodes and a bunch of other content from monks and other sciencey stuff related to breathing, but I didn't feel super proud of that episode because a lot of it was basically just taken from someone else who was smarter than I was that knew what they were talking about. So I want to be able to focus on more original content that, if not, yes, I can be inspired by other people and what they do, but I don't want to feel like I've just plagiarized them because, yeah, that's not ideal. It also means that I want to diversify my sources more and make more researching for each episode easier. So yeah, that's basically self-explanatory. Want to find more sources and make researching easier. And finally, I want to improve my episode idea generation strategies, which should come with time. I already have a big list of episode ideas, but yeah, overall, I feel like that one I don't have to worry as much about. It's just a matter of me getting used to this and developing my own process for coming up with ideas or finding guests that I want to talk to on the show. So yeah, those are my 3 main goals that I have for Cast of All Trades of things that I can directly do. Obviously, I might have goals for growth or for numbers that I might want to hit. I don't directly control those numbers. What I do control is the effort and it's the effort that I put in that I can control. So that's what I'm going to focus on. All right, next is moving into the research phase, with my goals lined up and knowing roughly what I want to do, how am I going to do that? I have to do some research. So what are the tools that I have at my disposal to do some research? So one of the tools that I've already been using that's been helpful for me starting this podcast out is Pat Flynn's Power Up Podcasting course. It's a course that, I'll be honest, a lot of the courses that I have are basically pirated courses from someone in Thailand who sold it to me for super cheap. I love and respect the people who made these courses, but a lot of them are currently too expensive for me to use, but I really want the information, and often later when I even go through the courses, I already know most of the stuff anyways, so I don't feel too bad about it, but I will give back to a lot of these course creators in other ways, and I'll try my best to give back to them how I can, but anyways, one of the tools I've already been using is Pat Flynn's Power Up Podcasting 2.0 course, where he goes into how to create a podcast from scratch. So overall, it's a good starting place, and I'm not done with the course yet, but I figured I know enough now, I can get started on this, and I can continue going through that Power Up Podcasting course to see what else is there here. I know there are a few things that I haven't done yet that are definitely going to be helpful, but yeah, that's one tool I'm going to use more. Another tool is a tool made by the YouTube channel Charisma on Command called Charisma University, where I personally think that I should improve my charismatic skills. That often for me means the vocal aspects, the presentation aspects of life. So I figured Charisma University, that's probably one that I could look more into. It's not a tool I'm going to dive into immediately, just because I'm going into my last semester of college currently, so that's what I want to focus on. But this is a tool that I have access to that I think could be interesting. Aside from that, I know I want to look more into doing different vocal exercises and different acting exercises, because one of the main things for improving the audio quality or just the quality of Cast of All Trades in general is learning how I can improve my presentation ability and such. And because podcasts are primarily an audio first medium, that means me being able to focus on and really improving my personal audio quality and like my presentation abilities. That's going to have probably the highest leverage of anything else that I do. So vocal exercises, acting exercises. And to get a lot of that information, it's likely going to involve me going to YouTube to find specific YouTube courses for specific skills that I want to improve. So I know currently I have a bunch of YouTube videos bookmarked for how to articulate better, how to be more eloquent when speaking, how to take your ideas and articulate them properly. So I have a bunch of different courses bookmarked, or a bunch of different videos bookmarked for things that I want to learn and things I want to do. So over time, as I'm going to be working my way through some of those videos, taking notes on this is something that I can do to practice, this is something I can do to learn and grow and try to improve my skills as a podcaster. And aside from that, the last main tool I see that I have at my disposal is other podcasts, where these are other episodes I can refer to, and preferably this is me referring to other podcasts that I like and respect, but looking at their first few episodes, not their current ones. Many of the podcasts that I love and that I enjoy listening to, they've been around for a couple years. They've had time to go through to improve their skills, to develop their podcast, grow their audience, to do all of this stuff. That's not who I'm currently up against. Well, technically it is who I'm currently up against, but that's not the person I should be comparing myself to. The podcast I should be comparing myself to is that same podcast, their episode 5, their episode 6, their episode 7, what they're doing at the very beginning, to see what have they done to improve over time. So those are the main tools that I have at my disposal that I'm going to be looking at to try to improve my skills. And speaking of skills, I'm going to move into the planning phase of what am I actually going to do? How am I going to make a plan to improve my podcast over time? In my mind, there are a couple ways you can do this, but for me, the best way that I can think to create a plan to improve Cast of All Trades is to make a list of everything that I can do and rank it according to leverage, i.e. how easy the action is to perform compared to the value of the output. So I haven't yet actually placed a value of how easy the thing is to do compared to the value of the output on the things I'm about to list. So we'll do it now sort of live as I'm recording this episode. So breaking this up into a couple different skill sets. There's the public speaking side of things, there's the interviewing skills, the video/audio editing, graphic design. I could probably slot graphic design in with video and audio editing, but I guess two different things now. There's AI and prompt engineering, there's project management, and there's researching. So probably without even looking into the various skills and things I want to work on, public speaking probably has the highest leverage out of everything else that I could work on here. So public speaking in my mind involves the presentation skills, idea articulation, general eloquence where I can properly express what I'm trying to mean, and everything flows more smoothly, and I sound like a normal, if not intelligent human being. Removing filler words and having more natural pauses, just sounding like a good human being. Vocal quality, where there are some ways that I want to alter my voice or change my natural speaking tone so that it's more appealing to the ear. And finally, remembering and conducting and connecting relevant concepts. So perhaps that's not necessarily public speaking and slots a bit more into the research side of things, but I think I have it in public speaking for now because being able to do this on the fly is part of what I see as good public speaking abilities. So when I look at this, I think to myself that a lot of these skills, they seem relatively easy to improve. They seem like there are probably some exercises I can work on. There are some skills I can actively pursue to say, I want to work on this thing. Here's what I'm going to do. It seems like these are some things that I can plan out pretty easily. So I'm going to call the ease of action pretty low and the value of the output very high. So public speaking is probably the highest leverage thing I can work on. Second to that is my interviewing skills. This is a show where I want to bring on more guests. So in order to do that, I have to be able to actually go out and schedule and request people to come on. That's a skill that I just don't know how to do. I don't know how to bring other people on the show. I know how to manage myself. I know how to manage my own recording schedule, but I don't entirely know. I've done this some in the past, but it's something I need to work on a bit more. This is something I have to work on purely through experience. I also have to get used to doing cold outreach with people, figuring out how do I contact this person properly, see if they want to get on the show, how I can properly invite them to get on the show. I guess it's probably the best way I can phrase that. So aside from the scheduling and the getting someone on the show side of things, there are three other skills that I think are very important when it comes to having a good interview. There is the question crafting, there's follow-up questions, and there's guest comfort. So first with question crafting, I feel like this is a skill that I'm already pretty good at. Amongst people I know, I'm well known for my good questions. It's what's gotten me a number of opportunities in the past. So I'm not too worried about that, but it is still something I'm always trying to improve on. Follow-up questions, I feel like I'm also pretty good at, but I have to do more interviews and see what that's like in person. So that one's a to be determined where you're placing at. Finally, there's guest comfort, where I want it to feel like a conversation. I want the guest to be comfortable on the show, and I feel like there's a skill there to have the guest feel comfortable talking and sharing while they're on the show. I don't want it to feel like an interview, so this is again something that I have to weigh out over time to see how well am I doing with this. So because the interview skills for me I feel like are very nebulous right now, this is for sure something I have to work on. I can't place an exact leverage value on this quite yet, but interview skills, that's something I want to do. Okay, so I will bunch up the video, graphic, and audio editing / design stuff all together because it's all very related. So for video, audio, and graphic design, the main sub-skills in here are animation, background noise removal, thumbnails, and background images stuff. And yeah. So of these, I think these are generally very low leverage things. They can take a lot more effort for me to do, but overall, the main part of a podcast is that it's an audio feature, and not just in podcasting, but even in video, where I know personally I'm much more willing to put up with a crappy video if the audio is pretty good. But even with the video like the video quality is amazing. If it's crunchy audio that sounds god awful, I'm shutting that off faster than anything else, because there's something about audio that just works better for people. So long as I can work on my public speaking and my interview skills and have pretty decent audio, I feel pretty good about this. So this is probably a lower leverage thing that is going to take a bit more effort for me to do, and I already have some good templates, some satisfactory templates. I don't know if they're good or not, but I'm satisfied with them for now, for doing thumbnails and for doing backgrounds. So this is a pretty low leverage thing that I'm not going to worry too much about, so that can go lower on my priorities list. After that is prompt engineering, where this could probably go hand in hand with marketing, because like I said earlier, I'm not a big fan of actively advertising and marketing things. I much prefer the actual production side. So that's why I'm relying more on AI to help me out with this side of things. So what does this involve? This involves me figuring out how to properly use different AI tools for different things. So that's going to involve creating SEO-based things. That means better titles, better descriptions, better marketing materials, which I don't entirely know what that's going to look like yet. Making good social media posts, and potentially down the line, making newsletters based on transcripts from podcast episodes. So because of the growth potential of this, I feel like this is going to be a more difficult thing for me to learn how to do, even though I'm already pretty aware of what AI and generative large language models are capable of. This is still something that can be difficult for me to figure out. So even though it's a high value thing, and it's also it's a more difficult thing for me to do. I don't think it's super hard, but certainly moderate difficulty. So this is perhaps not a high leverage thing, but definitely a higher leverage than the graphic design, audio, video, that stuff. So that's probably going to be placed second or third underneath public speaking and interviewing skills. And last but not least is project management and researching. So all in all, this whole thing that I've been talking about, I'm realizing now, is just project management. And project management is a skill that I've kind of worked on over the years, and I feel like I'm pretty good at it. So I'm just not going to worry about that, because I've already proven to myself I'm good at scheduling things, I'm good at planning things, and I'm good at following through on those plans. So going to leave that to the side. So actually, finally, is the researching side of things, where there are three aspects of this that I'm mostly looking at, and that is finding relevant information, connecting ideas, and interpreting and applying that information. So finding relevant information is something that I should work on a bit more, as opposed to me just going out to other podcasts that I enjoy and reappropriating their ideas and saying, that's mine now. And yeah, that's something I want to work on, because I want to be more original. I want to go out and find papers that I find interesting, or be able to just do my own thing, essentially. So what I think is going to end up happening is I have to come up with my own research system, where I can either find academic papers that I like and summarize them quickly, or who knows what. But once again, this is another, in my mind, it's sort of a nebulous thing, like the more nebulous skills that I don't entirely know where I sit or where I place with them currently. So I'm not entirely sure where the leverage value of this is, but I'm going to place this just below the prompt engineering AI marketing side of things. So with that in mind, I now have a set ranking of my priorities, so I can move on to the execution phase of my plan for improving the podcast. So with all this in mind, I have a priority order now. I can work on the highest leverage things first, then move over to the probably easier, easy things to do with lower value skills that aren't necessarily high leverage, but it's easy to do, so I can just quickly tack it in there. Then after that, I can start moving more into the harder skills with higher value things that it's important, but I don't know. I might flip-flop the easy low value skills with the harder high value skills, but in essence, it's important to keep in mind the actual leverage that you get with each of these things. So just based on my current rankings, my priorities are going to be working on my public speaking skills, my interviewing skills, my AI prompt engineering skills, my researching abilities, and ending off with the video, audio, editing, graphic design stuff. So yeah, that's the rough priority order that I'm going to work with. Okay, now that I have that in mind, I can move into the final bit of measuring progress. What does it look like? Like, what does progress look like for this? So if I want to look at it from a numeric perspective, I can look at the growth rate of viewership and I can look at the growth rate of subscribers. These are numbers that I don't necessarily control, but if I improve various aspects of the podcast, these numbers are likely good lagging indicators that I'm doing something right. And aside from that, I can create my own numeric score where I take the average of the how did I feel about this episode / did I improve this episode, end quote, score of the past 5 or so episodes. How did they go? And essentially take that average and make it, did the score go up or did it go down? Where, I don't know, maybe it's a 5-point score where I say 3 is a episode that feels exactly the same as last episode, 4 is marginally better, 5 is drastically better, 2 is marginally worse, and 1 is drastically worse. And the goal is to get a 3 or above average on each, on every score. So that's a good way that I could measure my progress on this. So that's it. That's roughly my plan for how I want to grow Cast of All Trades. I walked you through my process of deciding these are my goals, this is the plan, this is the tools, this is the research, this is how I'm going to do my thing. And the skills that I've analyzed are what I'm working on. Hopefully this has inspired you in some way to look at what you're doing to see how can I break this down into a plan? How can I look at this and decide what are my goals for what I want to do? What are my skills that I have to work on? What's the plan that I could put together? What research do I have to do? And really go through it until finally you can get down to the actual doing of the thing. But most of all, don't get stuck in the planning and research phase. A lot of people fall victim to the analysis paralysis of getting stuck down YouTube rabbit holes forever and think, oh, just one more book, just one more episode, just one more video, then I'll go do this thing. There's never a then I'll go do this thing. It's always a start doing the thing and research as you work. Sure, you can get a little bit of research beforehand, but what's really important is to have a set start date. Decide when are you going to do the thing, have that ahead of time, and set aside a certain amount of time before that to say, okay, before I can go start this thing, I have this amount of time to actually to prepare, whatever that preparation might be. It might be trying to read a book. It might be taking a couple hours to watch some YouTube to decide what are my basic steps going to be. But ultimately, you have to have a deadline. There has to be a deadline on your research for you to say, okay, I know enough to get started. I might not know everything, but I have enough to start. So, with all that said, if you've enjoyed this episode of Cast of All Trades, I have 3 super easy things I'd like you to do that would mean the world to me. 1, subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss our next episode. 2, while you're in your podcast app of choice, give the show a 5-star review. It helps us reach more people and in turn help us change lives through generalism. 3, share this episode with a friend or two, someone you think would gain a lot from the show. Word of mouth is the best way to help a podcast grow, and if your friend likes the show, they'll thank you for it. It's a win-win. Finally, with all that said, best of luck, tradesmen. I'll talk to y'all later. Ciao.